So firstly, we're going to hear about a really exciting project, reducing fuel consumption and protecting against oil price volatility with solar. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Daw. Mark is Managing Director for Namibia for B2 Gold. He's also the country manager, and this is a position that he's held since February 2015. He's worked in Namibia for 30 years and has twice served as president for the Namibian Chamber of Mines, and we're very pleased to have him here.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon to you for the second time that I'm up here on the podium today. I'm going to talk to you a bit about an interesting project that we have in my country, in Namibia, and that is about a 7-megawatt solar plant that we're putting in. But first, a little bit about the country. I was at a function last night, and some of the people that I met don't really know where Namibia is. And of course, the president to the south of this country calls it Namibia. So we've got a new name. That's where it is, right there in the southwest of Africa. And it's probably the second least populated country in the world after Mongolia, we believe. And we have about 2.2 million people at the last count, with 8.5 million square kilometers. So it's a very sparsely populated country. Just a typical view of Namibia, but those of you who think that Namibia is desert, you'll be very surprised if you go up to the northeast of the country. It's got tropical rivers and huge trees, perennial rivers. In the northwest, we've got big mountains. It's a semi-desert. In the southwest, we've got the oldest desert, very close to this, where this picture was taken, the oldest desert in the world, the Namib Desert. It's always been there. And it's rich in poor resources. We always say, when the government accuses us of not opening up more mines, that this country has a lot of resources, a lot of different minerals, but we're rich in poor resources, low-grade mines in general, the lowest-grade uranium mines in the world. With the start of our new uranium mine called Husab, this year will be in fact, next year it'll be in full production. We'll be the second largest uranium producer in the world, and that's at a grade of about 300 ppm, very, very low grade. So this is our solar plant. We're busy constructing it at the moment. This picture was taken by drone about a week ago. In this week, we've already filled up. This thing doesn't really have a pointer, I think. We've already installed a full megawatt of the 7 megawatts. I'll tell you a bit about the type of panels we're using and a bit more about the project shortly. Another drone view of the plant. As it's going up, we've cleared 24 hectares of land with the hope that, I've got one of my executives here from Vancouver, with the hope that they'll approve phase 3, which is to put another 7 megawatts in. So I'm going to hop across to Vancouver quite soon to try and milk the executives for a bit more money. What I want to stress from my talk this morning is that this is not a PPA. Not a power purchase agreement for those of you that aren't familiar with the lingo. This is an EPC, engineer, procure, construct project. And the reason it is an EPC, and we've gone for 100% ownership, is that obviously if it's a PPA, and I do apologize to those companies out there on the floor that are involved in selling PPAs, but we'd like to receive the full benefit from the solar plant. And it makes a lot of sense for any of you that go into the financial studies to look at complete ownership. There's obviously a model for a PPA where cash is not available, not readily available at least. And then it could be a partnership, but I'd encourage you to look at a partnership in the ownership as well as just the PPA where the power is sold to the mine. This is a picture I took with my iPhone a couple of days ago. You can see the people standing off there on the top right-hand corner. Quite a huge array of Caterpillar thin film, that's First Solar thin film panels. I'll talk a bit about why we chose to go that route. We evaluated all the different types of panels, monocrystalline, polycrystalline, thin film. We eventually went the Caterpillar route. I need to say at this point that the interest in selling solar to us was amazing. I had no idea how big this business is, especially in a country like Namibia with one of the greatest solar effectiveness percentages in the world. And we literally had to fight guys off and eventually shortlisted about 5 companies and chose, and this is, I understand there's some Caterpillar people in the audience here, they'd be very happy for me to tell you that we chose Caterpillar, mainly because of their microgrid solutions, the hybrid automation of the 3 different types of power that I'll be talking about now, PV, HFO, and grid. So I'll be looking at, excuse me, at the future energy generation costs, the subject of my talk. We've got cost-saving opportunities with incorporation of the 7-megawatt plant. And then the benefit of changing from an island producer, as we are at the moment, we produce our own power. We have a 24-megawatt HFO plant. It's been running for 3 years now, very, very effectively. We have 99% availability in our plant, and we've had literally no interruptions whatsoever in the production of gold. We have a very high-tech gold plant, and we can't afford to have dirty power. So one of the advantages we've had out of this HFO plant has been that it's extremely clean, absolutely no interruptions. It was a good decision that B2 took. And then I'm going to talk about something a bit more interesting that I heard some people talk about this morning, and I mentioned in my panel discussion this morning. The social benefits of this plant long after mine closure is something that I have to mention. And we're very excited about this project. I, in fact, have my corporate social responsibility manager for the group here with me. And the positive legacy, the sustainable legacy for B2 Gold is really in our company. It's something that's very much heartfelt. It's not window dressing. It's not whitewashing. And so, you know, I've had the nod from my executives the moment I actually try to sell them this idea. And as I said, I'm off to Vancouver to sell a bit more of the idea on Wednesday. So where are we today? Construction team's on track to complete by the end of December this year. The project cost, 7 megawatts, $8.5 million, all funded by our own cash flow, free cash. Now, the overhead power line was a bit of an issue. We actually originally had the overhead power line a little bit too close to the pit because we've recently discovered that the pit can be expanded beyond the original designs, which has given us a bit more life than we expected. Current life is, and I should actually have flipped up a disclaimer here. So my disclaimer is what I'm telling you right now. Current life of mine is about 10 years, but we have underground potential as well, so we're expecting it to go beyond there. That's not proven, so I can't state that publicly. And we're on track to commission the first megawatt block in February next year. Obviously, building it is one thing, connecting it up and making sure that it autonomously synchronizes with the HFO plant and eventually with the grid is another thing altogether. This will be the largest fully hybridized autonomous control module that Caterpillar has ever built, and they're very much into this new technology. So looking at the financial model quickly, just so you can understand, a lot of questions were asked of me during the breaks about the viability of the project. In order to understand the viability, you have to understand the base prices. So we're looking at Namibian dollar terms, $7.30, Namibian dollars 30 per liter for HFO. It's an HFO plant. We mix in diesel when we start up the engines. That's 54 US cents. Diesel 10.65. For the purposes of this exercise, we used 4% inflation. Our inflation rate in Namibia, in Namibian dollar terms, is actually around 11%. And the initial modeling, just to justify it, was based on 12% in Namibian dollars. But the differential between the Namibian dollar inflation rate and the currency depreciation rate is about 4%. So we decided to use 4% for the justification. We used a life of mine of 9 years, modeled exchange rate at 13.5 continuous, but with a much reduced inflation rate from around, as I said, 10 or 11% to 4%. Right, I will be talking later about the next phase, phase 2, which is to link into the grid. and the benefits of linking. And a lot of you have asked me about battery storage. And yes, we are very interested in battery storage, but we see more benefit to linking into the grid than to battery storage at this stage. So this shows you the energy cost going forward. We're looking at 2 cents per kilowatt hour. You can see the current generation cost around 15 US cents per kilowatt hour. And once we've started the plant with a full year of benefit from the plant, we'll be 2 cents below the current cost. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when one looks at it in terms of the savings in fuel alone, let alone the savings in running hours of your engines and all the maintenance costs of the engines, it's a tremendous amount. You'll see those numbers coming up just now. With inflation in the African environment, even pegged at 4% as opposed to more than 10%, you can see the benefit is getting more and more as time goes by. So here you can see the green is the green power advantage that we have. That's about $16 million US over the life of mine. That's after finance costs. And you can see the total expected costs of generation would have been $172 million US by 2026. That's going to come down to 156 million, which is a 16 million US saving that we have. Now, cumulative HFO savings in millions of liters is where it gets interesting. So this is just the PV and non-PV model, where you can see there that we have 26 million liters of HFO savings. So that's essentially 500,000 tons if one calculates the reduction in fuel consumption if we link into the grid, which I'll explain later, using 2.7 kilograms of CO2 per liter of fuel, of diesel fuel, pretty much the same as HFO. We're looking at a saving for our company of 500,000 tons of carbon dioxide by the end of the life of mine. A bit about the solar plant itself. As I said, the equipment we've decided to go for is the Caterpillar thin film. It's a proprietary first solar units built especially for Caterpillar. We have 62,400 panels. It's a lot of boxes of panels. They're all on site at the moment. They're going in. Quite exciting when we started to receive the shipments of solar panels from the States. We have 325 kilowatt inverters, SMA type inverters, 1,250 kVA transformers, step-up transformers. We have an auxiliary transformer of 50 kVA to carry the necessary power requirements should the solar be done. We're using Schneider electric switchgear and the CAT microgrid controller to autonomously synchronize everything. Now, there are a lot of companies that could offer very similar technology to us, but in our professional evaluation, we used pretty experienced companies to assist us, engineering companies, to look at the electrical engineering of this. Nobody could guarantee us that they could autonomously manage the power from 3 different sources. Initially, it was just the 2 sources that were approved, but we knew that we'd be linking into the grid in the future, so we wanted to make sure that we could switch over to the cheapest form of power based on the various time of use tariffs. Now, the NamPower utility, the equivalent of Eskom in South Africa, has off-peak time of use, peak time of use, and standard time of use tariffs for both high season and low season. So that's 6 different time of use tariffs, some of which are cheaper than the combination of solar and HFO, some of which are more expensive. So this really has to be an intelligent controller that is able to switch from one to the other continuously based on an algorithm that works out what is cheapest for us to use at the time. So let me just talk briefly about the phase 2 motivation, which I'll be giving to my executives in Vancouver, and I was asked by my boss, the SVP for operations, to remind everybody here that this has not been approved yet. So one of my VPs is right here, and I'm actually tugging on his heartstrings as I speak right now to make it work. So what is the rationale? Obviously, it enables us to use the off-peak time of use tariffs that are 8 hours a day from 9 o'clock at night till 5 o'clock in the morning on weekdays. On Saturdays, it's 24 hours a day on Sundays, and I think it's about 18 hours on Saturdays. I don't actually have that here. So tremendous saving for us if we can go to grid-linked power. Why didn't we do that at first? Because there wasn't sufficient power from the power utility, NamPower. And also it was dirty power at the time. It was constantly, we have a lot of lightning storms in our part of the world, and the grid line would go down often. The situation's normalized now with all of the green power being generated in South Africa coming up to Namibia. So we feel that it's not such a risk anymore. The off-peak energy source from NamPower will satisfy 45% of our demand, which is a lot, as you can imagine. And it's going to reduce engine operating hours, reduce the maintenance intervals, obviously. And I need to point out that all of the savings that I've been speaking about are purely through fuel savings alone, not through any maintenance interventions or reduced maintenance interventions, which is a lot of money, millions of US dollars. So we looked at the most conservative model to justify this plant and to justify the grid link. Now, the important thing for us is that it's able to feed back into the national grid as well, so we can actually be a net exporter, not just an importer. And that allows us, we will have an excess of power produced because we only use about 14 to 15 megawatts on a continuous basis, 24/7, and we have a 24 megawatt generator, and the country is short of power, so there's a big benefit for the country that we can export. 24 plus 7 is obviously over 30 megawatts that we'd be generating, of which we only use half. So that's a big advantage. And then I have a very short little movie to show you on our social closure plan, which will be funded by this photovoltaic plant, and hopefully phase 3 will be a second 7 megawatt module. And you know, our company is that forward-looking that we're really honestly looking at not receiving revenue from this plant back to Beta Gold, because we're in the business of mining. We're not really in the business of making money out of power. So we see that as a potential lasting legacy for social and environmental conservation efforts in the country. We're very, very involved in that type of thing, as you'll see from the movie in a couple of minutes. I'm going to flash through this. How am I doing for time, Adrian? 5 minutes, okay. So I'm going to go through these time of use tariffs very quickly. I have them if anybody is interested, off-peak, peak, and standard time of use tariffs. This is what's happening at the moment. In 2018, we won't have the full year benefit. So we'll have 10% reduction in fuel as a result of the solar 7 megawatt contribution towards the power mix. 2019, 13% of our power will come from PV. And 2020, only 9% will be from HFO, because 13% will be solar, 45% will be NamPower off-peak, 22% will be standard, and 11% will be NamPower peak. So it really is a no-brainer. These are the potential energy cost, and I say potential because it hasn't been approved, cost savings with the second phase, bringing NamPower in. And you can see there that by 2026, we have a 5 cent, actually 7 cent US cents saving. And here you have the fuel consumption in millions of HFO liters. For the green is, of course, the second phase. Millions of US dollars. There you have a huge saving of around 45 million US dollars if we go for the second phase. And I think we're on, was that, can't quite see that, 16 million US dollars on the HFO loan. Payback scenarios, I mentioned this morning that what I'm presenting here is actually the payback with finance costs, because obviously if we receive the money from corporate, we don't have to pay interest on it. But that's not fair to look at it that way. So I put in a payback period of 5.5 years at a discounted rate of 5.5%, and the NPV of $4.3 million US for the first phase and $13.5 million US for the second phase. So really it does make sense. It's kind of a no-brainer. You just have to do it. This is the short, very quick graphic of the link, the three-way hybrid. Don't have a lot of time to show that, but the CAT microgrid master control unit is able to, as I say, independently, autonomously source the different power streams based on the cheapest cost of power for the mine. So the future, once again, I'm going to run through these really quickly. We're going to create an SPV, assuming it's approved by the board, special purpose vehicle that will own the power plants, the 24 megawatt plant, together with a 7 megawatt solar, with a grid link to feed back into the grid post-mine closure. And we're hoping to share that with the local communities. And what's more, our portion of that will go towards our corporate social responsibility activities. So long after the mine is shut down, this plant will be pumping millions of dollars of cash per year, US dollars of cash per year, into our community, our very advanced community and environmental responsibility programs, which makes it very exciting for all of us. It's, once again, it's a total no-brainer. If you're making money by putting a plant in and you've got a fantastic legacy, why not go for it? So post-closure vision, I'm just going to leave time for this 5-minute film quickly. And this is the creation of a nature reserve. The green part there is the Waterberg National Park. For those of you that have been to Namibia, it's a wonderful area. The highest concentration of black rhinos on Earth, other rare and endangered species like the sable, roan antelope. Government is desperate to get those animals down onto the plains below. And I happen to be a director of the Cheetah Conservation Fund. This is the highest density of cheetahs in the world. The orange area there, one of the orange areas on the left, is actually all CCF, Cheetah Conservation Fund lands. So we're literally only 3 farms away from the top, from the top right, those farms together are all ours, 20,000 hectares that we have on, most of which is under nature conservation. It's called the Otrikoto Nature Reserve. So our education center, we've had more than 4,500 children pass through this environmental and science education center. We're partnering with the Colorado the Colorado State University through the Little Shop of Physics program, teaching them all about physics, encouraging Africans to get into the sciences and about the appreciation of nature and of wildlife. So really, those of you that come to Namibia, we'd love to show you. And this is our big plan for the communities, involving the local communities that have never actually benefited from the wildlife and from the nature in that area in the past, and they will be now. I've engaged, and my team has engaged with all the local communities, the Herero tribes people that were displaced by the Germans a long time ago. They've come back to the area now, and they're very excited about being able to do this, to earn a revenue from this. The film talks about that. Thanks very much. Enjoy the film.
What do we want to live for? Should what we do in life live on after we are gone? What long-term legacy are we really leaving behind? We want to leave behind a legacy of abundance and prosperity. We want to lead a global revolution where business is the catalyst for positive change. But how do we do this? One of the most exciting changes of the past half-century has been the rewilding of Namibia's landscapes. This occurred as a result of private ownership over wildlife being made possible in the 1960s, creating new economic and environmental successes and values. But it wasn't always like this. Just over 100 years ago, a European system of commercial farming arrived, imprinted and imposed on an African landscape, where cattle were seen as more important than pretty much anything else. So everything changed. Indigenous wildlife was seen as a hindrance to domestic livestock production. In fact, they were seen to be in direct competition. Wildlife was shut out or removed from most farmland. When Europeans first arrived, there were an estimated 8 million head of wildlife in Namibia. By the end of the 1960s, there were fewer than 500,000. Over decades, this European farming system caused extensive degradation. These were mostly imported livestock, not well adapted to the African environment. Fencing off blocks of land with their straight lines, preventing natural fires, not taking into account Namibia's highly variable climate. So much so that for every 3 cattle you could support in the past, now you can only support 1. Then something radical happened. In the 1960s, the law was changed. Farmers were given rights to use their own wildlife. This created an opportunity for people to change the way they work with indigenous wildlife. The change in the law brought about a real sense of ownership, triggering a radical shift in mindsets. Wildlife became a means of livelihood because wildlife now had value. But that wasn't all. Farmers noticed a change, an improvement in the health of the land itself, improved biodiversity and ecosystem resilience, and the protection of habitats. Today, wildlife and conservation is commonplace and a highly critical component of Namibia's contemporary land use and economy. Today, it is unusual not to have game on your farm because you benefit from having it there. It's common knowledge that wildlife is a better land use option than cattle farming. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Waterberg Plateau Park is a breeding ground for high-value wildlife species such as buffalo, roan, sable, rhino, and eland. Our dream? To create a co-managed landscape centered around the needs of the people and the natural environment. Our vision? To create one contiguous protected area, linking the Waterberg to the 5 B2 Gold Namibia farms. This can be practically achieved in 3 steps. Phase 1, which is happening now, is consolidating the 5 B2 Gold Namibia farms into a nature reserve. Phase 2 will link the B2 farms to Waterberg Plateau National Park. Phase 3 incorporates the Waterberg Park into this one large co-managed area, a smart public-private partnership, to create the Greater Waterberg Park, a protected landscape of national and international importance, bringing rare and endangered species onto the plains below, and the sharing of natural and human resources. When we introduce big game species, and when predators are allowed to return to the land, their presence changes the behavior of all other animals. So it's not only better revenues for landowners and ease of management, but also all the positive benefits of improved health and resilience of the environment, because indigenous wildlife is naturally adapted to the Namibian landscape. Now here's the extraordinary thing. Farming with wildlife is already adapting to global warming. Namibia's arid environment means animals have to move around to access the patchy resources after heavy rains, where mobility is the most important adaptation to an arid environment. The rewilding of this new park will mean removing fences and allowing game to move around freely over much larger areas. We are actively encouraging adaptive land uses that tune in with Namibia's natural variability, so wildlife will become an even more viable way of using the land. Farming with indigenous resources is a growing industry worldwide and more resilient to climate change. B2 Gold has an opportunity to seed and support a conservation initiative that will demonstrate these new and better approaches to land management. In many ways, we are going back to what was there before as we shift and return back to using wildlife over livestock. B2 can be the catalyst for the rewilding of this huge part of central Namibia. mining can be a key player in changing people's mindsets and these natural landscapes for the better. It's a game changer. This is a legacy that B2 can leave behind long after the company and you are gone.